Hello and welcome to the 11th annual Memphis Monologues. We appreciate all of you joining us tonight in this very special forum. Normally we have our presenters surrounded by love and support, and even though we're not all in the same room, I know across the state we are sending the same kind of support to these brave women who are about to share these very intimate stories. I want to send a thank you to the women who have helped make this possible: Laura Goodman-Bryan, Jacada Jessup, Kristen Laird. Without them, this could not be possible. I'm Krista Scott. It's the first year that I've taken over, and of course, we have unusual times. Going along with those unusual times, we do not have our normal silent auction, so instead what we are offering is for you all to donate what you would normally have spent on the silent auction. You can do that now. We also want to support the businesses that have supported us and Planned Parenthood in the past. You can see these businesses. We did not ask them to donate. Some of them have donated. But as you know, many of these businesses are restaurants and small shops and locally owned, and they can use our support as well. So we encourage you to shop with them and support them. In a moment, you're going to hear some amazing stories. But first, I want to introduce Ashley Cofield, the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Cofield, and I'm the CEO of Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi. Welcome to the 11th annual and first virtual Memphis Monologues. I'd like to begin by showing my heartfelt gratitude for Krista Scott, Laura Goodman-Bryan, Jacada Jessup, and Kristen Laird, and to all the volunteers who have planned this event for more than a decade. I also want to thank all of the businesses and individuals who sponsored Memphis Monologues this year, and to all of you for joining us and making donations this evening. Year after year, this is one of my favorite events, and I am so grateful for you making this virtual event a reality. Now I invite you to sit back, relax, grab some tissues, get ready to laugh and cry, and join me in welcoming tonight's courageous storytellers.
There's a point in the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 10, during the climactic lip sync for your life, where finalist Sasha Velour reaches up and tears off her wig. By Season 10, everyone knew this was a death knell, an overdone, overplayed move which would surely cost Velour the competition. Nothing could beat Roxy Andrews' Season 5 stunt after all, where during the lip sync for I Whip My Hair Back and Forth, she reached up to remove her wig, only for there to be another, longer wig pinned underneath. Sasha obviously wasn't going to do that. She was a high-concept queen, shaved bald, long gloves, pop art aesthetic, etc. But as Whitney Houston's So Emotional hits its most dramatic crescendo, Sasha Velour kneels and removes her hairpiece, only for a waterfall of rose petals to fall out and gracefully cascade around her. My vagina is a wig reveal. I personally identify as first, Southern, second, NB. That is, by the way, ENBY or non-binary, queer third, and Esquire fourth. Yes, the order is important. Now, I don't speak for the full trans community here, and there are some who, boy, disagree with me because we are a varied group of individuals, not a monolith. But here's how I see it. My vagina is a wig reveal. It doesn't matter what my actual genitalia is. It's the show, the beauty in the act of revealing that matters. In my most elaborate drag, most people are not able to identify which chromosomes, genitalia, and secondary sexual characteristics I possess. They can only see the signifiers of gender I have highlighted for them. I'm a drag queen. Yes, some of you are likely thinking, we know. It's obvious. And it is obvious right now. I go by Moth or Maypop or something else named after nature. But I do drag all the time, even when I'm not wearing false eyelashes and $300 worth of discounted, always discounted, costume jewelry. I do drag when I go by my other name and look a lot more pedestrian, When I'm working, or studying, or fishing, or cooking, I'm doing drag. Drag is, after all, the performance of gender. And I am always performing. Every time I put on makeup, or refuse to ask for directions, or coo over to little whams, I'm dragging it the hell up. We're all born naked, and the rest is drag, says historically transphobic RuPaul. To begin preparing for drag, I wash my face and apply moisturizer, primer, and concealer. The canvas isn't even blank yet, and I've spent half an hour of prep. It's a lot of work to look this good. Well-meaning but misguided people sometimes tell me, it's not drag if you're performing the gender that matches your genitalia. To which I respond, you're wrong, because they are. And what these misguided people say doesn't even apply to me anyway, because I'm trans. As a note though, even if I was cisgender, or a person whose sense of personal identity and gender corresponds with their birth sex, those people would still be wrong. Because cis people both lean into and transgress gender norms all the time. And drag is constituted of both acts. But I'm trans, so they're doubly, triply wrong. The next step I use to get into drag is to apply foundation, heavy, to create a blank space and begin to contour my face. I add cheekbones where before there is not much. I put on a first layer of mascara and apply false eyelashes. There is a moment in Sleepaway Camp, an 80s horror movie, where it is revealed that a character, Angela, that was up to the very end believed to be a female victim, was in fact a male murderer. The scene shows the camp counselors coming up on a naked Angela, stroking the head of one of the boys that goes to the same camp. When Angela realizes she has been seen, she drops her victim's severed head and stands, her face in a dramatic rictus of fear and manic shock, and her penis on full display. The horror of the moment is not in the fact that this assumed innocent girl is in fact a murderer, but in the fact that, to quote the camp counselor, "Oh God, she's a boy." Sleepaway Camp is not alone in this move that equates transgenderism to predation. Norman Bates puts on his mother's clothes in Psycho. Buffalo Bill is rejected for gender reassignment surgery in Silence of the Lambs. J.K. Rowling can't stop writing transgender female villains into her boring mystery novels. I'm fighting a certain image created over a long history of media repetition every time I dress up real pretty. I moved back to Memphis from New York in March last year because of Corona, and then was laid off from my job as a lawyer in July. The last year has been one of the hardest of my life, but allowed me time to do some things that I likely would never have otherwise done. I've been able to spend time with my retired parents. I've learned that I actually really enjoy spending time outdoors. I've started sorting the wheat from the chaff of what had become my accumulated identity over the years of my early adulthood, and surprising no one, there was a fair amount of chaff. I got a little less angry and a little more optimistic, and I was repeatedly reminded why I moved away literally as soon as I could when I was 17 to go to boarding school in another country. I love Memphis, but I'm scared too. The final step to get into drag is to apply color to my eyelids and to my lips. If I apply the color too early, I risk messing up and having to start the entire process all over. My eyelids gleam with blue and golds, and my lips are usually bright, eye-catching red. There's a moment I remember of a very good friend of mine telling me I would spend my life faking it. That my identity was a cry for attention and nothing more authentic. Well, I like attention. You don't dress up like this if you don't somewhat crave it. I have not yet removed the wig, that great symbol of lush, decadent, often nostalgic for the 80s, femininity. And I never need to. My vagina is a liminal space, a Schrodinger's pussy, a quantum particle, both there and impossibly not there. It might be another wig. It might be rose petals or a bald, shaved head. It might be a penis, and that doesn't matter.
My name is Madison Parnell, pronoun she, her, and I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm just gonna jump right into this. So, depression and anxiety in Black families are rarely a household name. It's the black sheep of the family, the dark cloud at the cookout. You hear things like, you don't have anything to be sad about. You have a roof over your head and food on the table. Why are you so tired you don't do anything? And my personal favorite, you had it better than I did when I was growing up. Add this on top of being diagnosed with a slew of mental illnesses. I was on a wild ride to Gaslightville. Population, every black child whose parents don't believe in therapy or dealing with their own shit before they have children's. It is important to have the conversation about mental health awareness to break generational trauma and so that we can learn to properly take care of ourselves, but also others. I can vaguely remember my childhood, and it comes randomly in waves. I remember good times, mostly bad or nothing at all. I know now through a solid year of therapy is due to depression, anxiety, and trauma. I am known for being the confident, outgoing person around my friends and people I'm comfortable around, but I do often crash out of nowhere and go off the grid. I overwork and put a lot of pressure on myself. I don't give myself the grace that I often give to others. I'm still learning how to communicate my feelings and not take them out on people around me. I'm trying to be more open with my struggles with mental illness and communicate it with my family and friends. I still fight many silent demons that make my days hard. When I'm really happy, I get anxious that I might be manic. When I'm sad, I get anxious because what do I have to be sad about? I have everything I ever wanted. I get more anxious when I'm anxious because what the fuck am I panicking about? Why am I overreacting to everything? I don't have it as bad as most people. It's an endless cycle in my head that no one can see. I remember being a super anxious child. I grew up with a dad who was in the military and an ex-cop, so I would hear stories about things that happened and how I need to do certain things to stay safe. I remember not falling asleep until my dad would come home after work at midnight. I was afraid someone would break in the house with just my brother, mom, and I there. Then it turned into me not being able to sleep because I was afraid that the house would catch on fire after a field trip to the fire museum. One day I was home alone and the alarm went off. I was afraid because what I was told finally came true. Someone was breaking in the house and I was alone. I hid in the garage until my dad and brother came home to get me. It turned out that I had actually set the alarm off. I never felt safe at home for many reasons, but also because of the emotional neglect and gaslighting. When I was living with my parents in my early 20s, my parents went out of town for a week, and I stayed up all night until the sun would come out the next day before I went to sleep. If I slept, I was afraid something would happen and no one would be there. I had lived alone for 2 years now, and I've never felt scared to be in my space or to sleep. I didn't feel comfortable sharing my fears to my family at that time because I knew they would just say it was in my head. This turned into years of passive-aggressive conversations and fighting with my family. Growing up taller and bigger than most people in my class was always cool until the weight part started to take over the height. I remember being a good athlete, though. I played almost everything under the sun. I really enjoyed playing volleyball and swimming. I was really good at both. I started volleyball at school and I practiced at a competitive gym. And I started to swim at the YMCA and I was invited to swim on a competitive team at the University of Memphis. I quit both because I didn't like the way I looked in my uniform and I was anxious about what was being said about me, if anything at all. I was depressed because I truly loved it. The thoughts about my body and the way I dressed were not my own thoughts, and it shaped the way I carried myself through my entire childhood and teen years. My family would often comment on my weight. When I visited extended families' houses, it was always, "You lost weight," or "You're gaining weight," before they would even greet me. They would also ask me about my grades when they knew I was an average student after hearing about my twin brother's straight A's and honor rolls. I always heard, "You can do better, you just aren't trying hard enough." It's hard always being compared to someone. I was my own person and I struggled with mental health issues and learning disabilities that were untreated until I was an adult. I had countless tutors and I was put in children's Weight Watchers. I wore sweatshirts and baggy pants in Memphis summers. I had to ride the exercise bike in front of my mom before I could do anything. I would forge my parents' signatures on bad grades and I would pretend to eat good food. I wouldn't eat until I was alone and then I would binge. I just wanted to be at peace and not feel anything. I found comfort in silence and food. When I was sleeping or binging, everything seemed okay. I had a hard time expressing myself. I was sad and suicidal. I started to isolate, and I would overthink every interaction I had with people. It felt like one day I woke up and I was too anxious to go out into the world and be seen by people. I felt horrible about myself and felt that people thought the same, even strangers. It was so hard for me to do simple stuff like go to the store, eat in public, make phone calls, and be in crowds. It still is to this day. I'm often overstimulated by group sounds and lights. The anxiety that comes with it makes me sweaty and irritated. The sweating would make me more anxious because people could see me sweating and that made me sweat more. It was even hard for me to go to sporting events with my friends. I remember things like walking under bleachers so I didn't have to walk in front of everyone. I still get to places almost 30 minutes to an hour earlier to map out my entrance and escape plan. Every time someone whispered around me, I thought they would be saying something about me. I lived in constant paranoia when I went out, so I just stayed in most of the time and made friends on the internet. I enjoyed being an emo kid on Tumblr and using my mental illness as humor. I was good at it. I enjoyed texting and talking to my friends in real life over hanging in person too. Even that slight bit of joy was taken away from me after I found out that my texts and messages were being read by my parents instead of them trying to actually build a relationship with me. This made me even more depressed and anxious because I didn't have anywhere that made me feel safe or comfortable. My parents eventually put me in therapy and got me a psychiatrist, and I was actually excited about it. My therapist insisted that I brought my parents in for a session after my first session. By the third session, she went to jail for stealing from her patients. My psychiatrist at the time diagnosed me with manic depression and severe anxiety, and she prescribed me countless medications, and they were mostly tranquilizers. She said none of them would actually work until I lost weight and ate right. I know exercise and sunlight is a good thing to help with mental illness, but I would think to myself, how am I supposed to exercise and eat right when I can't even get up and wash my ass for days at a time? Baby steps, I would tell myself, baby steps. I eventually stopped going altogether and started binge eating and neglecting myself and sleeping more. In college, I hit my lowest point. I couldn't make myself go to class. I only ate Domino's pizza and I slept all day. I finally went to the counseling center on campus when I finally realized I couldn't do it anymore. Instead of helping me, I got the vibe that they were going to have me committed, so I just quit going. I moved back home hoping that it would be better, but it wasn't. I was just as angry and miserable and depressed as I was when I was a child. I decided to pick up a job so that I wasn't home as much and my grades started to slip. I had finally had enough after conversations with one of my parents where they said I was lazy and if I didn't do better, I wasn't going to be shit in my life. I decided to move out on my $450 bi-weekly paycheck from Starbucks. I thought I was the shit. I started to work at a nursery and babysit after moving in with a friend from middle school. Everything felt like it was balancing, and it felt great for a few years. I eventually moved in a house with another friend from middle school who had been my best friend from 13 years. It ended horribly and we no longer talk to this day. It was another traumatizing experience where I didn't feel at home when I was home. I was constantly angry and stressed. I got into different relationships and friendships, and if I felt that they weren't going to work out in the long run, or they did one thing that I didn't like, I threw them away. I started off 2020 in a very toxic work environment where I was told we were family, and I was overworked and abused. I was made physically ill every day by the hours I was pulling, the lack of rest, and the stress. I'm still reeling from the disrespect and pain from that. I have a great job and a great boss now, and I still feel like I'm in that same space. I constantly feel like I can't trust people, and it makes it hard for me to communicate my feelings again. It's hard for me to extend grace to others when I'm not patient and forgiving of myself. I was terrified of being hurt again. I didn't want to let people in, and I didn't want to be close enough to anyone so I wouldn't be in pain. I couldn't control much in this life, but I could control who was in mine. I never learned how to communicate or what healthy communication was until recently. I'm still not great at it, but I don't communicate or hurt someone, I am at least aware of it. I had not learned until I met my current therapist, my past partner and current one. I didn't learn from my family and the majority of my friends. I was not held accountable for my actions, and I did not put boundaries in place to protect myself. My therapy says I avoid love because a lot of things I associate with love are painful and hurtful. I'm scared to let people love me because I'm scared it will end in trauma, so I leave first. I never leave nicely either. It's usually a big production, and I tell everybody about how I was wrong or misunderstood. I played the victim in every situation because at the time I truly felt like I was. But sometimes after reflecting, I realized it wasn't always the other person. I learned that I do have some toxic habits that I hate in other people. How do I expect to break generational traumas and I'm the cycle? I know there are a lot of mentally ill Black people who have these experiences and had no one to confide in their communities or families. Thankfully, now I have a supportive family and friends after putting in place boundaries. I think through generations of emotional suppression and having to just go with the flow is greatly ingrained in our DNA. Having to suffer in silence and act like everything is okay when it's not. To be grateful for whatever you have because it could always be worse. Our feelings and emotions are just as valid as someone you believe to have it worse. A lot of Black people don't talk about their feelings. They don't talk about the childhood trauma and how it affects them as adults raising children. It's basically hurt children raising children. I know a lot of Black people feel that they have to censor themselves against abuse from their elder family members or respect them just because. I think millennials and Gen Z are finally breaking generational curses and encouraging communication. Mental health and emotional abuse is not talked about enough. Kids and young adults are saying no more and choosing not to be emotionally abused. It's hard for a Black girl to feel like magic when she never heard that she had never seen magic within her family or relationships. The magic can happen when we stand in our truths, be emotional, stop hiding ourselves, share experience, take care of each other, and hold each other accountable. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rebecca. By family, I'm known as Becky. I've also been called Becky Lee, Beck, and Becca. I often pause to think about which name to sign when I'm writing notes to people. And in my younger years, I was conflicted about which name to introduce myself as. I became opposed to nicknames and decided if I were to ever have children, I would give them a name to be called by, a name that could not produce a nickname. My spouse and I named our first daughter Edie, and when she turned 7, she gave herself the nickname Edith. As a child, I remember my mom really enjoyed telling my sister and I fibs and stories, but she never affirmed they were fibs and stories. If we dropped food on the floor, there was no 3-second rule. We were told the devil licked it, and we had to throw it away. So for a time in life, I believe there was a red guy who looked like this, in close proximity to my feet. My mother would also tell me I was adopted and that my real mother was Chinese. So for a time in life, I believe that as well. Life can be confusing for a kid, but just as well for adults. We can't control how people are perceived or how people perceive us, even with social media. And with life experiences, we keep evolving. My guess is that most of us have experienced some form of identity crisis, right? For me, I've experienced identity crisis in 3 different areas: as a Mexican American, as an artist, and as a Christian. Some of you may have just thought, wait, she's Mexican American? Yes. But you don't look Mexican. How should a Mexican look? But your last name doesn't sound Mexican. But your hair's not strawy. Yeah, I've gotten that one before. And of course, but you don't speak Spanish. So it doesn't matter that I grew up going to family quinceañeras and other festivities with mariachis and Tejano bands, or that we went to the rodeo on Tejano night, or that we cracked eggs on Easter, ate tamales for Christmas, buñuelos for New Year's, that we visited Mexico every year to get our school supplies and medicinas, galletas, and other goods. Because I don't look Mexican, my last name doesn't sound Mexican. And because I'm not fluent in Spanish, I must just be American. But my parents and grandparents do speak Spanish. Your family speaks Spanish and you don't? I get that one mostly from first-gen Latinos. Yes, it's true. We live in a country that predominantly speaks English. And I do regret that I spoke in English to my family instead of Spanish. Man, it sucks to get the look of shame from other Latinos. And it sucks that I can't comfortably be proud of my heritage in public without feeling like I'll be viewed as some sort of imposter because I don't meet the stereotypical requirements. Oh, imposter syndrome. That became a popular term among many artists. Imposter syndrome is when you doubt your talent, skill, or accomplishments and have this internal fear that somehow you'll be exposed as a fraud. For an artist, I think it helps to consistently remind yourself that art is subjective. People love to critique and vocalize what they like and don't like about it. As a graphic designer, I have to consider what's best for the client and their audience, but I also have to consider what works with their personality. As much as I really like orange, there are people out there who have something against orange. So you got to adapt. I've come to realize my struggle isn't with imposter syndrome, but rather my identity as a designer. Because I've spent years adapting to other people's tastes and personalities, I've nearly lost my own. I find it admirable to recognize another designer's work because they have accomplished a personal style and made it a part of their identity. Shall I ever get to that level of perception? Consider me dubbed with imposter syndrome. However, adapting is not a bad thing. It can be a necessity for survival. It should be good to adapt. But what about in faith and religion? We are sometimes taught that questioning faith and adapting to the times is veering us away from God. But then that would leave us to put our faith in a single interpretation of the Bible, the book that has been manipulated by many people. Even slavery was justified by biblical humans at one time. One time, an evening when I was working for a church, I received a call from the lead pastor asking me to keep a secret. His words were, "You can't tell this to anybody, and I think you understand why." And I responded, "Yes." Because you don't question the religious hierarchy. If they tell you it's biblical, it must be from the Word of God. But he never followed up. I kept a secret, and years later, I realized brushing things under the rug isn't really a way of showing grace. When seeing so many people manipulated by faith and religion proclaim something that isn't in line with the big picture of the Bible, I can see how so many people view Christians as hypocrites. I respect theologians just as any valuable historian because they are researching the facts and times of the written documents. But I am skeptical of the self-help books that are personal interpretations of the Bible. I would rather we read the stories, discover what is speaking to us, and not push that upon other people's lives to abide by. And yet, we must remind ourselves that we are all human. We have that in common, which is like art, critiquing and vocalizing what we like and don't like about life, what we think is right and wrong. There are things in the past that I've said or done that I don't agree with now, and I'll continue to evolve in my identity. For many days, it may feel like a crisis, but my hope is it will naturally evolve into acceptance. Thank you.
I'm Mary Loveless, and I was asked to do a monologue because of an article I wrote the week before the presidential election in November, stepping out of my safety zone and imploring my friends not to vote for Trump. As I reviewed the past year's speakers' monologues, I kept thinking, I got nothing, because my story lacked the heroism and inspiration shown by all those other women. Indeed, I feel that way looking at this year's list, which includes the brilliant Audrey May. I don't know if she'll remember, but we both took piano lessons from Mrs. Oates, and while I gave up after a few years, having progressed no further than probably something like The Farmer in the Dell, Audrey was the star student playing Beethoven sonatas at our little recitals. But anyway, I thought, well, perhaps I do have something to say from a little bit of a different perspective. But then I wondered if the anti-Trump election theme was even relevant anymore now that Biden and Harris won and everything's sweetness and light, right? Yeah, right. It appears that even though the Trumpster is gone, we still have to keep fighting the good fight. What with people like Marjorie Crazy Pants Green in Congress and the Orange Menace still lurking around in Florida. Perhaps what drove me to write my November article in the first place wasn't just because of my disdain for Trump himself, but also for the bigotry and ignorance and hatred that he ginned up, gave voice to, and leaves behind. The title of my article summed up who I was and how I felt. This white, gun-owning Southern debutante's heart hurts because of Trump. I started, I've lived an extraordinarily privileged and comfortable Southern white woman life. My relationship with my childhood Black housekeeper reads like something out of The Help, only without the poop pie. I've been married for 37 years to a wonderful and fiscally conservative man who is the founder of my family's feast. I've been in leadership positions with the Junior League, was the president of the Women of the Church of my Episcopal parish, was the first woman board chair at my daughter's private girls' school, and once held membership in 2 separate garden clubs at the same time. I was once, even a long, long time ago, a Republican voter. On the more progressive side, as an associate editor of Memphis Magazine, I was part of a team that won a national award for a special issue on race relations in the city. I served on the board of Shelby County Head Start, graduated from Leadership Memphis, and was a longtime volunteer with Planned Parenthood, starting as a birth control counselor in the 1970s and ending up as the board chair of the Memphis affiliate while pregnant with my 3rd daughter, thus living into the mission of every child wanted and loved. A lot of my friends tease me for being a radical liberal and a rabble-rouser, though my views and opinions have always been decidedly more progressive than those of most of my social circle, and I've never outright refrained from expressing them. I was always at least terribly polite about it. We wouldn't want to offend anyone now, would we? Remember, part of being a nice Southern lady means not rocking the social boat, and I have always obliged. That is, until the Sandy Hook massacre in 2012. After that event, I felt compelled to speak out, which I did by occasionally staging little one-woman sit-in protests outside the local gun shows, which took place with alarming regularity at the Agri Center. I'd sit in my soccer mom chair, hold a sign stating my opposition to private ownership of military-style weapons, and take notes. I've done this at least a half dozen times, and although I was always yelled at and always threatened, I emerged unscathed with a heightened and personal appreciation for the First Amendment. And while I have no reason at all to believe my protest had anything to do with it, the Agri Center has now quit hosting gun shows, saying that they no longer fit within the facility's mission. And then came 2016 and Trump's election. Since then, I've done many more things I've never done before. I've marched in women's marches and gun sense marches. I've regularly called and written my legislators. I've hosted an organizing party for fellow nasty women, and I've become a clinic escort at Planned Parenthood. And now, in November, I'd written a polarizing article, basically calling out all of my comfy, white, well-off friends. The article continued, enumerating and elaborating on all of the things that Trump himself is. A liar, a cheater, a racist, a misogynist, a serial sexual assaulter, a fake Christian, a lover of dictators and authoritarian strongmen, and an utter incompetent. And I ended the article with the following. If you, my friend, are still planning to vote for Trump, then you have indeed hurt my heart and troubled my soul. I was going to just post it on my piddly little Facebook page, but one of my tech-savvy daughters said it needed a wider audience, so she added some photos and published it on Medium with a link to my Facebook page. Click. There it went. I took a deep breath and waited for the negativity and trolling and onslaught of all caps virtual yelling. But no, that's not what happened at all. I was so wrong. Almost immediately, I received an avalanche of positivity and love. Medium tells me that almost 7,000 people have viewed my article, with 3,200 people having read it all the way through to the end. The Medium link was shared 78 times, and among my Facebook friends, it received over 250 likes or loves and 83 positive comments. 35 people took the time to send me a separate email or text congratulating me and telling me I was brave for writing it. I mean, that's sort of a shame that writing something like that is considered brave. Keep in mind, these were mostly women and mostly like me. Out of all that, I received only one negative comment on my own page, after which a mutual friend messaged me, well, you know, she's never been the brightest crayon in the box. Obviously, it struck a nerve, and people were agreeing with me, which was most gratifying. It made me know that I was not alone. And yet, I suddenly came to the startling realization that from many of those who I would formerly have categorized as my closest friends, the silence was deafening. And in typical white Southern lady style, they said, and continue to say, nothing. And that's fine. As part of my evolution from a quiet liberal into a more vociferous one, I found that I don't really give a flip anymore what other people might think about me and my opinions, and I'm much happier for it. I'm just sorry I spent all those years worrying about offending those chuckleheads and suffering those fools gladly. No longer will I stay silent in the face of injustice, or laugh off a bigoted joke, or brush off a sexist comment, even though sometimes silence can be tempting and more convenient. I will remember Elie Wiesel's quote, "To remain silent and indifferent is the greatest sin of all." And I will pledge to listen and to use my privilege and power for good, not evil.
My name is Stephanie. I'm in, wait, this is not the Amazon Anonymous meeting, is it? Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm an Amazonaholic. Looking around, I should have known better. There's no coffee pots. Well, my name is still Stephanie. I've been asked to speak to you today for a few minutes about almost anything. Well, they did say to stay away from the Amazon thing, lawsuits and lost packages or something. So having completed my recent work on nuclear disarmament, I'm going for a simpler tone, perhaps a topic I know something about. It could be about me, but may diverge in many directions, which should surprise no one. For those of you who miss the liner notes, I'm a transgender woman. I did not get here quickly or easily, but the point is that I got here. Since I was a little girl, I have known that I was a girl, but oh, not so fast. One year, about second grade, we were getting our Catholic school uniforms. I asked my mom why I didn't get the little green jumper with the white top like all the other girls. And she said, because you're a boy. Wow, when you're small, moms know everything. She wasn't mean. It was just that one part of my biology didn't line up with the other. Say, how does that work? Well, not so well, it seems. I was also the oldest of what would be 7 boys, so, you must keep up appearances. I was raised almost as a girl. No, I didn't get any dresses, but I couldn't join sports. I was too frail. I spent a lot of time cooking and baking and reading. I cleaned and ironed and sewed. I did get to go out and play, but with all the other girls and the boys in the neighborhood. Let's agree right now that I'm a fortunate woman. Most of my life has been spent in the bastion of white male privilege. A few people, including one of my counselors, asked, why do you want to do this? Do you know what it is that you're giving up? And my answer was no, I don't. But I couldn't continue as a male anymore once I acknowledged that I was a woman. For many years, I've known that women have to be twice as good for twice as long as their male counterparts, even to be considered for a seat at the table. I've been married to the same woman for 41 years as you hear this. She's my inspiration, life partner, best friend, and the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me. Her name is Kathleen. She's the love of my life, and more on that later. Through our shared lives, I came to see many of the ways that women are held back. Kathleen is smart and very talented. It has been suggested that she should have been an engineer or the president of IBM, but not in this lifetime. Some choices, then some situational, institutional issues held her back. First and foremost, she had the audacity to be a female, and then held similar credentials to her competitors. Not the right mix in this man's world. Now I became a nurse, and as a male in the nursing profession, I was always considered promotional material simply because I lived as a man. It was actually humorous. I thought that nursing was the right opportunity for me to be my feminine self without coming right out. But I was given supervisory positions even though many nurses had much better clinical skills, but I did not have a hormone issue. I was calm and could be trusted not to get upset. I was actually told this on more than one occasion. What a shame. Or perhaps not. That left the women with the better clinical skills giving the right care. So a long time ago, I was living in Phoenix. I was in the USAF. Have I mentioned that? Okay, well, I was. I was living off base in old military housing converted to apartments. Cinder block construction, concrete floors. Painted concrete floors. If you live in the dusty Southwest and have painted concrete floors, the only way, and I want you to remember this was 43 years ago, to clean these floors is to take everything off, then sweep, mop, and repeat. So here I am putting all my furniture out on the front lawn, getting ready to clean. All went well. The floors got spick and span, and moved my furnishings back in. Done. Or was I? Unbeknownst to me, my neighbor had a sister and a friend visiting. The sister was looking out the window and saw me working. Of course, everybody had to come see. I was in good shape at the time, not too hard on the eyes. Val, my neighbor, was asked if she had met me, and she said no. Later in the evening, when I was relaxing in my clean living room, I heard a knock on my door. My front door. All my friends knew to come to the back. The front door was usually trouble. So how little did I know. I opened the door, and staring me in the face was this beautiful woman who said, "Hi, my name is Kathleen, and this is your neighbor Val. Can we come in?" You could have knocked me over with a feather. Of course I said, and welcome them both in. 2 attractive women wanted to come into my house. I was delighted to have cleaned the living room. I mean, how lucky can one guy be? And Val was very pretty, but not in the same way as Kathleen. Now, don't go getting too far ahead of me. I'm still telling the story. We chatted, shared a few indulgences, and then the women agreed to come back the next night. The next night they returned, and we played some poker, the clothing kind. I lost very badly and ended up taking a shower. The women decided to cut cards. Who knows why? Kathleen cut an ace, and that was that. They both left. But Kathleen came back and stayed. Oh, they toyed with me for a couple of months, but it became clear that I was very interested in Kathleen. Of course, we got married, had 3 boys, and had a mostly good life together. During this time, I would amass a small amount of clothing I could wear when alone. Guilt always made me discard or purge my collection each time. Then slowly, I figured out that I could not live this way any longer. The internet had taught me that I wasn't a freak, just different from most people. I hoped not to lose Kathleen. We had a great relationship, but I had to do something. Excuse me a minute. Thank you. We had been married about 20 years when I told Kathleen that we needed to talk. We sat down on the couch and she had a worried look on her face. I told her that I had a cross-dressing habit at the least. I did not know where it would all go. She looked at me and chuckled. Is that all? She said. She had thought of many other things, but not that. We agreed that I could dress as I liked at home and she would help me find clothes that fit. Fast forward many years. I'm not out yet, and we're on a cruise with pre-planned activities at our ports. One day we had a pampering spa day with lunch and nice long massages, and they started us with a manicure. I loved it and kept it on after we got home. One of my therapy appointments, my therapist asked if I was bipolar. I said, well, a bit, but why do you ask? She said, oh, well, you're in here with your nails painted and you're all happy. I told her, oh, it was just gender issues. She said, well, you need to see Bob. He deals with those. And that was the end of one existence and the start of another. Kathleen was a bit troubled with the thought of my starting hormones and moving ahead with living as a woman, but seems to like the new me even more than before. I'm the same person, but different in so many ways. I was very fortunate to have met Kathleen in male mode. She would not have been receptive to having a female partner at the time. But now that we've flipped the switch, things are even better than they were. I'm more accepting, generally calmer, and much more loving. There are probably many more things I could tell you about our transition. For example, I cannot find wigs to fit this noggin. It's a bit disheartening. Perhaps we'll get there next time or even next life, who knows. I don't worry about being misgendered in casual situations. I don't worry if I don't fit people's perceptions of how I should look or act. I know who and what I am, and with my loving wife by my side, I'm happier than ever. I am worth the effort. Thanks for listening. Have extraordinary lives.
My name is Audrey May, and this is my Memphis Monologue. I don't know what I expected my life to be at this point, but I don't think this was it. I'm now in my mid-60s. Many women have a ritual to honor this stage of life, that of being a crone. Crone is supposed to be a time of wisdom, passing on our hard-earned knowledge. Somehow, though, I don't feel very wise. Instead, I feel tired and my joints ache and I have gas, and I wonder where I left that thingamabob I can't remember the name of. I keep waiting for that post-menopausal zest that Margaret Mead promised me. Sometimes I do have moments of clarity, though, and those are truly beautiful. But I thought I'd be Wonder Womaning it through my days, and most of the time I'm wondering where the hell I left my power bracelets. I think I expected I would have more answers by now. Instead, most of what I have are questions. What have I done that's useful? What contribution do I still have to make? What is most important in my life? Have I loved deeply enough? Will I ever get to travel again, and will I be fit enough to do it? And why does my body hurt in so many ways it didn't before? For many years, Marge Piercy's poem, To Be of Use, was my favorite poem, suitable for a would-be feminist activist. It starts off, the people I love the best jump into work head first, without dallying in the shadows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. It continues, I love people who harness themselves and ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I tried hard for many years to be of use. Even still, I struggle with my basic insecurities. Am I good enough? Have I done enough? And now I wonder, how long should I do what has to be done again and again before saying, fuck this shit, I'm tired. Isn't it somebody else's turn? Sometimes I'd rather be dancing or walking in the woods or having a nice long dinner with my longtime friends who've also given themselves to the movement and are also tired. I used to be able to simply power through my insecurities, just work harder, stay at work longer, send more emails, manage more paperwork, serve on more committees, make more protest signs, attend more rallies, make more lobbying calls, do more. Now my body no longer allows me to sustain the illusion that more is better or even possible. My greatest fear is that I will fritter away the time I have left on the planet. And yet I engage in many of the forms of denial that other people do, distracting myself with work and worry and food and the internet and tending to minutiae, rather than really being present. I also struggle at times with my surprise and disappointment at not being in an intimate relationship at this stage of my life. I wonder what it would be like now when I am so used to doing things my own way, to risk having a partner with whom I am emotionally intimate, who, as my wise housemate would say, knows my insides. What would it take for me actually to take that risk, to make space in my life for someone else in that way? There was a brief moment a couple years ago when I thought I might be willing to try. A chance reconnection with my first woman lover from 40 years earlier filled me with an energy and a boldness and a desire that I had not felt for a very, very long time. In the end, it settled into a sweet and distant friendship. I still feel a little wistfulness for what was not to be, but also a deep gratitude for discovering that I could indeed feel that intensely again. I'd like to feel that joy and that excitement and that curiosity in other parts of my life. In her book, Crones Don't Cry, Jean Shinoda Bolen lists 4 guiding principles for life. 1, show up. 2, pay attention. 3, speak your truth. And 4, pray for best outcome. It's all good advice for having a more meaningful life. As for the 4th one, I do believe in the power of prayer, but I also believe in the power of putting prayer into action. Frederick Douglass is reported to have said, I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs. So I'd have to amend the last principle to work for best outcome. And sometimes you do that work alone, or what feels like alone. But sometimes you have the great good fortune, as I have for most of my life, to work and celebrate within a circle of community. My circles of community have mostly been women, and it is there that I have had my greatest sense of joy and security and commonality of purpose. Whether preparing now newsletters for bulk mailing, and many of you will have not the faintest idea what a bulk mailing permit is, or arguing over strategy to build a feminist organization, or a feminist bookstore, or a queer community center, or to get legislation passed, or to share meal prep for a multiracial women's festival in the Klan-infested South, or to boldly hold hands with friends and lovers, marching and chanting and singing in a public queer parade with sometimes tens and sometimes with thousands of others, and I've done both, or in a labor march or an anti-racist action, or sharing food and life experiences in a book club, or doing life review with other queer seniors online via Zoom. It's the togetherness, what in political terms we'd call solidarity. I remember, even when we disagreed, that's what I remember, and that's what sustains me when I'm afraid or discouraged or just bone tired. Ultimately, it's the feeling of belonging to a community, of being heard and understood, of being valued, that matters. And yet there is still the specter of the great aloneness at the end of life that looms, that beckons, that asks, who are you? Who am I? I'm now 66, and both my parents died about the age of 70. And while I fully intend to live an active life into my 90s, the facts of my genetic code do give me significant pause. I do see more clearly now that my mortality is real. I still don't quite believe it, but I come closer to believing it every day. Caregiving for dying friends who are close to your own age will do that. So a poem by Maya Angelou says what I aspire to now. A woman in harmony with her spirit is like a river flowing. She goes where she will without pretense and arrives at her destination prepared to be herself and only herself. Maybe, just maybe, cronehood is getting in touch with your true power and your limitations, with who you really are. And finally, accepting all of it. So at this point, I'm just trying to learn to be my truest self, to show up, to pay attention, to speak my truth, and at a slower and more thoughtful pace, to work for the best outcome. And also to remember to be grateful every day for the diverse and amazing circle of women which sustains me.
There's a story of a young woman whose mother told her, "You better not never tell nobody but God." One day, she composed a letter. "Dear God, I'm 14 years old. Always been a good girl. Maybe you can give me a sign letting me know what's happening to me. Last spring, after little Lucius came home, I heard them fussing. He was pulling on her arm. She say, "It's too soon, Fonzo. I ain't well." Finally, he leave her alone. A week go by. He pulling her arm again. She say, "Nah, I ain't gonna. Can't you see I'm already half dead? And all these children." She went to visit her sister doctor over in Macon. Left me to see after the others. He never had a kind word to say to me. Just say, "You're going to do what your mammy wouldn't do." Then he grabbed me. When that hurt, I cried. He started to choke me, saying, "You better shut up and get used to it." But I never get used to it. And now I feel sick all the time. I be the one to cook. My mama, she fuss at me and look at me. She happy, because he good to her now. In another context, at another time, another letter was written. Dear God, I'm 52 years old. I've made some mistakes, but I've tried to be a good girl. Maybe you can give me a sign letting me know what's happening to me. The first time I was in this type of marriage filled with rage and pain, I thought it was because I made bad choices and married a man who emulated his father, which resulted in my bruises. I choose to do whatever he wanted, good or bad. Because, why? That was supposed to make him happy. When he became frustrated, I became his punching bag. My response was to become skilled in putting on my mask, covering up the bruises. This time it was supposed to be different. A different husband, but the same results. I decided to go to seminary and was told he should go too. Why? Because this will help him understand what I'm going to go through over the next 3 years. Okay. I put on my mask again, and I helped him get into seminary with me. First, he was happy to go to seminary. And then he started demeaning me when his grades were not as high as mine. Those grades are given to you. You can't be smarter than me. When ministry opportunities came, his response was, "Your first priority is home. And if my needs aren't met first, you won't be meeting anyone else's needs." His only kind words came in the presence of others and when he wanted something from me. When I couldn't fix his problems to his satisfaction, I was taken back to the first time. The first time I was abused. The first time I was told I was less than. The first time I put on the mask. These are 2 letters written to God, almost 100 years apart. 2 different women. Celie from The Color Purple, and me, Regina Clarke. 2 different generations, same issue. Faced with a lifeless predicament. This morning, like many days before today, along with so many other women in the world, I got up, washed my face. Like the other women, we brush our teeth, we get dressed, and we put on the mask. A mask, you're asking me, what is that? It's the mask that we put on to ensure that what people see from the outside in no way contradicts our spoken status of being blessed and highly favored. The mask we wear to cover up those few extra pounds that we've been unable to get rid of. The mask we as women are required to wear as we strive to successfully manage the multiple roles society requires us to fulfill. The mask we wear to cover up the hurt that we have endured as we experience the pain and disappointment of dreams that have been dashed. Whether it covers up the wrinkles that are reflective of the stress that we experience as we constantly work to be the nurturers that God has created us to be. Too often, we go throughout our days, weeks, and months and lives saying we're okay. But underneath those smiles, the laughter, and the "I'm doing just fine" is a woman experiencing hurt and who may even feel helpless. So my question to you is, what do you do when you find yourself in a lifeless predicament? Now, everyone may not be able to identify the depth of the similarities between Celie and myself. You may not understand the need to project an identity different from that one that's deep inside. You may not recognize the emotional, mental, and or spiritual trauma experienced by those that you see every day or even every week. If you spend less than 5 minutes watching the news, or if when you're in the store you pick up a copy of the Commercial Appeal or the Memphis Flyer, you will see stories of people hurting. Hurt by violence, hurt by health issues, hurt by life, and hurt by death. There are women who are watching today who are desperately hurting and trying to cover it up with a brave face. Some have old wounds that just won't heal. Others have fresh wounds that are still raw. Wounds from being a single mother trying to make it work. Wounds from marriages going through rough waters or even marriages that have fallen apart. Wounds from being a mother who has been left wondering where did they go wrong when they were raising their child who is now out wandering while wondering when will they finally come home. Wounds from children trying to navigate the muddy waters of childhood as they move into adulthood, all in the midst of pressures from within the home and from outside. Wounds from witnessing family members trying to escape their hurt by losing themselves in alcohol, drugs, gambling, or even shopping binges, all just creating even more problems. Wounds from being part of a family who has lost a child, a sibling, or a parent, all while trying to keep their head above water. At some point in most of our lives, we feel helpless and hopeless. What was once alive in our lives has been declared dead. Those dreams, those passions, that hope, that health have all been declared dead or dying, and the funeral has begun. The mourners have arrived to celebrate the life of what has now been declared dead. But today I want you to know the coroner's report is under review. Now, I don't know how many of you are like me, but I love watching shows like Law & Order, Rizzoli and Isles, NCIS, and CSI, all of the different ones that they have. Many of those episodes open with the discovery of a crime scene, and what shows up? The coroner's van. After a cursory examination of the body and the surrounding scene, the coroner declares a preliminary cause of death. But there are times when circumstances and situations cause the coroner's report to be placed under review. There are times in our lives when the doors on our hopes and dreams have been shut and all hope is lost. Time when the bank threatens to foreclose on that home. Homelessness is now on the horizon. Times when our dreams for a new job or position are put into question. Times when that diagnosis is daunting. But after a further review of our circumstances, the preliminary decision is put under review. The Gospel of Mark recounts the story of a 12-year-old little girl who's dying. Now, the Gospel of Matthew says she's already dead. I cannot imagine the grief of this mother, that what she experienced as she sat by the bedside of her daughter. Her husband, the pastor, had left home to go find Jesus in hope of a miraculous healing for his baby girl. While he is anxiously waiting for Jesus to travel with him back to his home, the mourners have already gathered and they are ready for the service. They have queued up the funeral music. Now, during this time, and even now, mourners are not limited to just family and friends. There were what we call professional mourners. They were the people that showed up to make sure that the funeral is grand and fabulous. As well, they were also there to be nosy. When the crowds arrived, or as it is today, when they logged into Zoom, they started the funeral and they preempted the execution of Jairus' faith. When Jairus, the pastor, they started the funeral and they preempted the execution of Jairus' faith. When Jairus, the pastor, approached Jesus and pleaded for his help, Jesus told him, "Be not afraid, only believe." People around Jairus laughed. Why? Because what they saw through their own natural eyes differed from what Jesus saw. You see, a new job with full health care benefits and a salary that not only allows you to pay all your bills, but it allows you to fill your refrigerator and your cabinets with more than ramen or oodles and noodles, and you still got money left over. Others see your current position as the best you can do. You see a life of retirement that allows you to travel and enjoy your family both near and far. Others laugh at your pie-in-the-sky dreams. Jairus' faith is evidenced by his insistence that Jesus come to his house and see his daughter despite the coroner's preliminary report. The coroner said she was dead. Jesus said, I got this. If we are not careful, people will prematurely declare your prayers dead, especially when the answers don't fit their timeline and their tradition. Their attempt to preempt the promise of faith. Life events may happen and detour us from our predetermined path of success, which causes us to consider those goals to be dead. Tradition will disqualify a high school dropout from becoming the CEO of a major corporation. Tradition will disqualify a teenage mother from earning 2 master's degrees simultaneously and embarking on the pursuit of a doctorate degree, all while going through menopause. Tradition will disqualify a convicted felon and rule them ineligible for a second or even third chance. Tradition will disqualify a domestic violence or sexual assault victim from ever experiencing true love again. Sometimes you have to dismiss the tradition and choose faith. Why? Because faith will allow you to believe that the impossible is possible. Faith will allow you to pack up your home of over 50 years in Virginia and move to Memphis for a new job doing something you've never done before. To the people, she looked dead in our text. And there was nothing left to do but to start the funeral services. The coroner's preliminary report ruled her dead, deceased. While miles away, Jesus told the Father otherwise. Do not allow others to rush you through your faith process, all because of tradition. The people didn't have faith, but the mother and father did. It takes faith to go to Memphis International Airport, board a 727 aircraft, and trust a person you do not know, operating a plane that you can't fly, to take you 35,000 miles up in the air while telling you to sit back and enjoy the ride. It took faith for you to enter into the room where you're in right now and sit in a chair built by a person that you do not know and trust that chair to hold you. It takes faith for you to go to the bank, hand your hard-earned money over to a person you do not know, and trust that when you go to the ATM machine or when you write that check, that money is going to be available for you. Faith allows you to see through a different lens. The people in the text didn't have faith to believe that she was not dead and were even quick to go carry the bad news. But it was the faith of her parents that mattered. Their faith postponed that funeral. As we walk in faith, there may be delays, but our faith allows us to see those delays as part of the process. While they waited and prayed, Jesus had the audacity to stop and heal another woman. Now, this woman had been plagued by an issue for the same number of years that the pastor, Jairus' daughter, had been alive, 12 long years. With his status and position, Jairus could have easily expected that Jesus was going to just pass by this woman who had this issue so long that many saw her as hopeless. And instead of a name, this woman's identity was defined by her issue. Too often, people begin to forget who we really are, and our issue becomes our identity. In this case, Jairus put his status and position aside, put legs on his faith by seeking and petitioning the Son of God. However, before he could move forward, he had to stop. He had to wait, and he had to watch another person get healed. Sometimes when we're praying for things, it can be hard to watch others getting healed. But as I've heard others say, and I totally agree, that if God has blessed your neighbor, that means God is in your neighborhood. That means God is coming down your street. That means the blessings are on the way. The people had put a period in the story where God put a comma. If you only believe. While Jairus is waiting on a miracle, Jesus is working a miracle. The story wasn't over. That was just a pause. The faithless had mixed up the truth and the fact. The fact was she was dying, or as Matthew wrote, she was dead. But the truth is, Jesus said, I got this. I may be the only one here that can testify the times the world thought they knew the facts, but God knew the truth. Fact, teenage mother. Truth, mother of 3 children, an Ivy League trained attorney, a recent college graduate preparing to pursue a graduate degree, and a world-traveled missionary who embarked on her first mission trip to Haiti at the age of 14 and is headed to college in the spring. Fact, college dropout. Truth, graduate with 3 degrees. Fact, domestic violence victim. Truth, domestic violence survivor. Think about your life. Think about when the world had facts, but God had the truth. When the facts are thrown at you and you begin to feel overwhelmed, just pray and say, Jesus, you got this. Now for a moment, let's go back to our text. Before Jesus could go into the room, he first had to do some house cleaning. Now, I'm not saying that he said they had to sweep and vacuum and mop and all of those other things. The beds didn't have to be made. But he needed the faithless in the room to be removed. Jesus limited those that were going to witness his work only to those with a tested faith. As we move forward in faith, we must be careful who we allow in our personal space. Everybody who's with you physically is not with you. Dead things and dead people in your life will stay dead until you clear the room. Some people and things in our lives must be let go so that we can actually live. So that we can go from being survivors to victors. The difference being a victor at the end of the day can stand up and celebrate what they've gone through and what the process is. Please understand that those people that God puts around you, yes, loyalty is important, but a choice has to be made. The question is, do you want to remain dead or do you want to experience a resurrection? Do you want to stand up and come back to life? The resurrection of your health, the resurrection of your hope, the resurrection of your hallelujah. Not only did Jesus say she was not dead, he proved it. As I like to say, you can show me better than you can tell me. after taking the little girl by the hand, first he called her Talita, which is a term of endearment similar to honey or sweetheart. Literally, it means little girl. Next, he says cum arai, which means arise. Jesus didn't say be resurrected or come back to life. He told her get up. What do you say when you go into the bedroom of your child or another person who's sleeping in your house? Do you say, come on, resurrect? Or do you say, look, it's time for you to wake up? Jesus did exactly what most loving parents would do when he said, honey, get up. Today, Jesus is reaching out to each of us and telling us to get up. He's telling us to arise. Sometimes we have to be reminded that opening our eyes and getting up is all we need to change the report. The report you received is not all that it appears to be. Now that's the good news right there. The report that you received is not all it appears to be. Remember that. The hope that appears to be all but gone is not dead. The only way for us to change the report on our life is to believe. Believe that the coroner's report is under review. If only you believe the coroner's report is under review. So my question is, are you ready to take your issues to God and let Jesus speak life into your situation? Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Little girl, arise. Honey, arise. My sisters, arise. My brothers, arise. Because the coroner's report is under review.
I want to thank the women who shared their stories tonight, and thank you all for being here to witness their truths. You still have time to donate. Every bit helps, as you know. The programs that Planned Parenthood is doing is so important right now. I want to say a special thank you to Savannah Bearden and Katie McMurtry with Planned Parenthood who helped make tonight possible. Thank you all, and I'll see you next year.